What up, everybody? Welcome to the IAG Thursday Thing. This thing we do every Thursday, and man, we have been on it with these. I don't think we have missed one in months, which is awesome. I am super stoked about that. Um, this is where we all hang out. We get to talk to cool people. We get to learn stuff, and it's basically your Subaru meet via podcast or Discord hangout if you're lucky enough to be catching us live. And yeah, we got a killer one today. I'm joined as usual by my partner in crime, Warranty. Warranty, how you doing, bud?
Dewey, I'm doing okay. News of Chicago. The mayor, Brandon Johnson, testified to Congress. And let me put it to you this way. Brandon Johnson has a 6% approval rating right now, and yet all the comments were, wow, he did a great job. So, happy about that. Everything dope about America comes from Chicago.
Including dope. Okay. I don't agree with that, but we can go with it. Sweet. And then we're also joined by who actually had to back out. He's hiding in the audience. But executive producer Jordan, he's the guy who kind of does all the technical stuff in the background, and sometimes he co-hosts, and he's good to have around. And then thumbnails were made incredibly difficult by today's host or guest because he just doesn't take pictures of anything. So Randy did what he could with what we could find, and that is why we have the thumbnail that we have today. Thank you, Randy, for doing your best.
Shout outs to executive producer Jordan, and shout outs to Randy. Thanks, guys.
This week, we're joined by an OG. Excuse me. I decided to drink some water and it went right down the wrong hole. All right, let me get myself together. We can hack all this out. Good God. All right, here we go. This week, we're joined by an OG. This guy's been around very long time. And what's really crazy is I was telling Warranty earlier that I think he's been like 1 degree of separation away from this guy and has never really realized it. He's heard of him, but he's never actually got to talk to him. I guarantee he's talked about him and didn't even realize it. And honestly, in my opinion, one of the most insane success stories within the Subaru community. Just due to the things that he got to do due to it. Not so much like the money made or whatever, but a lot of people don't understand the influence this guy's had. So I am super stoked to have Micah on the show. Micah McMahan from 3MI Racing. What up, Micah? How you doing?
Doing just fine. How about yourself? Aside from the water incident.
Yeah, dude, I just tried to choke myself in my own water. It happens. You'll have that on those big jobs. So, how you been, dude? What are you up to these days?
Oh goodness. Recovering from the flu, so my voice is a little bit whack right now, but at least it's back now, somewhat. But no, doing the thing I've been doing for the last couple of years is kind of consulting, designing parts for people that want stuff. Private label, a lot of it, and when I have a time tinkering out some new Subaru bits, because I think you've alluded to this in other podcasts. It's like I'm stuck with Subarus. I like them for some reason. It's like this bastard child of things, and you just love them for whatever reason. So yeah, still play with them. Can't get away from them. One afternoon I'm playing with McLarens, and the other afternoon I'm tinkering on a Subaru oil pan or something. Go figure.
That's wild.
You're the perfect example, okay, of somebody who has played with literally everything. And you are still screwing with Subarus. Like, this is what I've tried to tell people for years. It's like, you'll be back. Wherever you think the grass is greener, you're coming back.
It's just a hiatus. You'll be back. You don't realize it.
You'll be back.
Yep.
I'm going to go buy a Mustang. You'll be back.
Oh.
It's
Or at least yeah, you might get the Mustang, but you're gonna pick up another Subaru too, that sort of thing. But yeah.
oh, once you're in this community, like really in this community, if you really loved it at one point, you never really leave it.
Yeah. It's
It's
one
it
I think back to like the OG days, right? When the WRX first came out. And I was a broke high school kid at the time, so I had my little, 96 Brighton coupe that I turbocharged, and looking at the WRX, I'm like, yeah, that's awesome. One day.
well, let's talk
And
about
like
that
I
real
showed
quick.
up as this kid,
Roll with that.
and all
Okay.
these adults that had WRXs were like, this is cool. This kid shows up, and like they took you under the wing, sort of thing. It was great. The community's been it
Yeah.
fostered so much of what I've done. But yeah.
So was that your first Subaru then?
Yeah, it was a red, brilliant red '96 Brighton coupe. So gray interior it was the super like ghetto one. It didn't have the passenger side mirror. It didn't have
Yeah.
a tachometer. Yeah, like I had the uber
Wild.
bottom dollar Brighton, but it had all wheel drive, and that's part of why I got it. I
So
fall
what year
into
did
the
you get
WRC
that?
trap.
When did you start messing with Subarus? What year was that?
Oh, oh one.
Oh, 01. Okay, so
Yeah,
that was like right in the beginning. That was the very first WRXs we're seeing on the show is the '02 model
yep,
year. Yep.
yep. March of '01, if I recall. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep, yep.
Dang. And you were a high school kid. How did you end up with the Subaru? Was it through the parents or what? How did it
No,
happen?
no, it was actually solely like we grew up with like Volvo, the Chevy truck. There was a three on the tree that was just used for firewood and whatever, and Volvo 240 station wagon, 1980 Toyota Corolla SR5. Like everything was a manual except for that, and we got a family minivan, that sort of thing. So no, there's no Subaru involved at all. It was WRC, so I was watching WRC at the time. Had no favoritism towards any of them, and I was like, these cars are cool, and I have one like this. So you go to the internet and see what's available in the U.S., and there's nothing. You're like,
Yeah.
there's no all-wheel
Why
drive
can't
Focus. That's not real. The no Focus RS, none of that's real. Like the Skoda, I don't even know what a Skoda is. And you kind of go through all this stuff. And you're like, Subaru, at least they're here and they're all-wheel drive. All right, well, we'll go with that. And that's literally how it started.
Wow, yeah.
Marketing
So
works.
because you could buy a Subaru, that's what got you like.
That's
That's what
why
the
you have
advertising
the
worked on
Subaru.
you.
Yep,
Wow.
I can buy
Here
it
we
in
are,
all-wheel
20
drive,
plus
and we
years
can worry
later.
about the power later. Yeah, or the old EJ18 turbo pack. Yeah, back in
Wish
the day.
everybody
So
was so pure.
yeah, I mean
Yeah.
it's so let's talk about this. You get this car, okay, manual all-wheel drive Brighton with no mirror on one side and no tachometer. So this is literally the base of base of base of base models.
100 horsepower soaking wet.
Yeah.
On a good day.
Like this has got the 1.8 liter with no ABS or nothing. This is as base as it gets. So you get this car, and this is your daily, I'm assuming, to go back and forth to high school. Let's
Yep.
let's walk through your modification path a little bit on this.
So you start in any typical form. You go, rear lateral link, so you can put on a sway bar, because those models didn't even come with rear sway bars at all. So that was one. I also hopped directly into doing my own turbo kit. I'm trying to remember. I looked at Subachad and all these other guys who were using the VF flanges, and I had one that went to was it a T28 T3? I think is the turbo I had on an old Air Research, Garrett
Yeah.
turbo. Yeah, I mean it was super ghetto fabulous. Had a Vortec rising rate fuel pressure regulator on it, and an old Haltech ECU. I don't even remember what Haltech it was. It was ancient. Yeah, get ghetto fabulous, and learn how to bang on that. And thankfully, the EJ18 is pretty robust. And when you're only pushing 6 to 8 pounds sort of thing on it, like you're not gonna nuke it instantly by being a little off on timing sort of thing. So you learn easy. It was not going to impress anybody, but it was fun. It was my little thing. Like I literally backed out of my senior trip with like my senior class because the money that I was going there, like going on a cruise, I wanted my money back to have money for this turbo kit. Like I'm that level of I've got the sickness.
He's
Oh
all
my gosh, nerd.
I've got the sickness. But yeah, so I had that beat around on it. Ended up selling off the turbo kit. Sold off the turbo kit, was selling the car because I decided I want to go with the WRX swap. The WRX has been here, guys were wrecking them. I couldn't afford the engine and a car, so I had this nice, clean Brighton coupe that I paid like $5,000 for or something in my turbo kit. So part of the turbo kit, as I was selling the car, it actually died in a car wreck. I was in a car accident. USA took care of me and actually paid me more than what I bought the car for, thankfully. And so that went towards a wrecked, 11,000 miles on it, wrecked O2WX engine and ECU, clutch, all the good bits, top mount cooler, etc. And then I drove all the way down Virginia Beach with buddies of mine. Actually, one of the cars was a 01 2.5 RS because I talked a buddy into buying one. And so we road tripped on down, picked up a 94 sedan, not as cool as a coupe, but it was cheap, and picked that up from Blowing Rock. So it was like a 6-hour drive there and back, so 12 hours round trip. Ended up getting a hotel for the night. And so that became the donor that I swapped the WRX in, which got dubbed the WRL. And yeah, I had that all through college, various levels of, modification, injectors, VF39, that sort of stuff. Broke college kid stuff, but yeah, AGXs and the old Pro Drive springs on it, some camber plates, and little stuff to autocross it in, but I'd also then, at that point, hopped into Formula SAE, so seat time in an FSE car is way more fun than running SM in a GC8.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, so not everybody knows what Formula SAE is. That is like, they look like little mini Formula 1 cars, and you build them in college with a team, and then you go compete against other colleges. Anything else we should know?
What college you go to?
Old Dominion University in Norfolk, Virginia.
Okay.
Old Dirty went there, mechanical engineering and minored in motorsports engineering.
Yeah. Old Dirty bastard went there.
Yep, Old Dirty. That's what we call it.
Oh my gosh. 2 degrees of separation. Here we are doing from.
I'm telling you, man. You don't even know. At this point, you were already well within. You were a part of the fabric of early Subaru tuning in the US as far as like being a part of that community. I'm assuming when you're doing Formula SAE and all that noise, we're probably talking 04? 05?
Yeah, 04, 05, 06, and 07. I did 4 years of it. Yeah.
Okay. So you were a part of like the big growth, you were pre-Ken Block.
Like I did the engine swap before anybody did like OBD1 wiring harness services. Like, you remember, was it iSpeed who ended up partnering with Crawford and kind of got absorbed? They were doing the merge harnesses way back when.
Yeah,
they started off and they were not touching OBD1. It was me and one other former board member. We were doing the O2 WRX swaps, the USDM swaps, and he and I were messaging back and forth trying to figure it out. I think he got his running like a week before I did, sort of thing. Like, it was a bastard. No one will support you, and you're just gonna find your way and do it. And it was my daily driver, so go figure, right? Like,
so people are a little new to Subaru swaps, especially when you're trying to swap an older GC. They don't really understand that mechanically everything kind of drops in. Okay, that's the easy part. The wiring with Subarus is horrific. It's not like a Honda where your engine harness and your chassis harness are different. In a Subaru, everything from basically your dashboard forward is all one harness. So it's tough. It can be really, really rough to you have to basically have both complete harnesses and pull out what you need of each harness to make one usable harness.
Yeah, I remember one of the really goofy parts is so like the pre 98 cars, they were still mechanical speedo. Actually, I think 97 went to the newer clusters. I can't remember. Some of them they switch over.
Right.
But yeah, so they literally had a cable driven speedo that came off. You didn't have a sensor that sent a signal to the cluster and then to the ECU. So you had to figure out, all right, this runs to the to your gauge cluster. There's a signal coming off of that you had to tap into to run to the WRX ECU to make it happy. Otherwise, it puts you in like a safe mode. It's like, I don't know how fast I'm going. There's all kinds of dumb stuff that you find out, and you swap it and realize that there's the fuel pump controller and all the other sorts of things that are in it that you didn't have from the chassis, and you're like troubleshooting shit and going through all these bits, and people are throwing out random ideas of stuff that it's there, and no one knew at the time. So we were figuring it out as we went.
No, a lot of this stuff is common knowledge now, but back in the day, nobody knew what the hell any of that shit was.
Yeah.
So, I'm assuming, were you tuning your own Helltech?
In high school, that and my buddy Matt.
So you guys just kind of like just kind of fishing your way through that, huh?
Yeah, the blind leading the blind off of what you read off of forums online, that sort of thing. Yeah, like ROM Raider didn't exist. U2. I ended up going to UTech at one point. I had a Link 44 on my
Okay.
WX swap. So I started stock ECU. Then I gone to the Link 44, or WX Link as they called it, and had that for a while. And always had a cold start issue with the thing. It would hot start fine, but cold start sucked. Like I had my buddy Bill at college. Like we'd park in the same parking garage. I'm like, dude, it'd be like winter time. Like, let me make sure my car starts first. I was literally keeping a stock ECU in the car in case I had to hot swap it in, so I could at least start my car.
Yeah.
It was that bad. Like, could not figure out the cold start on it. Ended up switching to a UTech because I'm like, I need something a little more daily driver friendly here. So switched to the UTech, and that's just I'm sure it's down in the garage somewhere in a box. We'll donate to the Smithsonian someday.
Oh, I bet you your garage is full of like a museum of OG Subaru crap. I know I still
it's pretty
find
bad.
same stuff. I've moved so many times and I still find crazy shit. Like, why do I have this?
Yep. Like old tuning laptop with the old ECU in case at some point it needs to get used again. Yeah. But yeah, that's never gonna happen. But yeah. So yeah, I kind of did that. I started on NASDAQ. Like I started off as like a baby in terms of like what I knew about engines, that sort of stuff, and ended up picking up a lot. And then obviously went off to college or university as they call it across the pond. But yeah, went off to that and then did Formula SC and went way down the rabbit hole and did the motorsports program. Ended up running the engines lab at school and interning over at NASA Langley and all kinds of crap. So like I went way down the deep end. And
well, that's where I want to go from there. So you went through the motorsports program, right?
Mm-hmm.
What did you do right after that? Like where? Because at this point it was somewhere around this area is where I actually like started making contact with you through forums and stuff. So this is around the area I met you.
So probably would have started. I'd say where the Subaru stuff really started kicking off was actually I was still in college.
Okay.
So I was working over at Langley in Hampton, which anybody from that area knows you got to go through a tunnel and it sucks. And then all the way back to the oceanfront, Virginia Beach, where I was working at a dyno shop, moonlighting there when I had time or, between classes or in the evenings, weekends, etc. At a shop called Dyno Inc. at the time. We were the first all-wheel drive dyno in that area. And then all aspects was across town in Chesapeake. Good guys there. Got to know them quite well. But yeah, ended up being there. And when I was at a shop, I ended up meeting Dominic Asia, who many guys on this probably know as well.
Yep,
so
we
Dom
had
and I
him
connected.
Like a month or two ago.
I'll also say I thought he was on like 2 or 3 months ago. Yeah.
Yeah.
One of the Dom and we hit it off. Oh. Yeah, and he was further down, the rabbit hole, the Subaru world as I'd been because he'd been playing with his for several years and tuning cars longer than I had because he's about a decade older than me. So, glommed on, started picking a lot of stuff, or he'd have questions about things, or I've got the engineering side, but he's got the interest, or I'd read a thing, or I used to do, domestics and this sort of thing. And so one day we were literally, it was, I think after we had family dinner at my folks' house, and we're standing in my parents' kitchen, and we're just sitting there chatting, and he started talking about, de-stroking an EJ25, because we didn't like how the power delivery on the 2.5s were at the time. I'm like, yeah, that, make it more like essentially then just a big displacement EJ20 and start running down the rabbit hole. And so I went down the math side and what can I package? What can I fit? What are the, instantaneous displacement, velocity, accelerations, all that sort of stuff look like on the bottom end? What does dwell compare to? All that sort of stuff. Start getting really nerdy into it. And that was kind of the birth of the de-stroker. Shortly thereafter, ordered parts and had a couple of guys internationally who wanted them. And that's when I started 3MI racing, right out of college. I started as an LLC, and it was really it wasn't the day job. It was always to kind of be just the hobby business because I wasn't working in motorsports at the time. I had started initially with a boring stint at doing quality assurance for steel, like chainsaws and stuff. Left there and went and started doing R&D at Bush Vacuum because it was closer to home, paid better. And at the time, I was in my F-250 as the daily because the Subaru was under the knife. And, that's when shit hit the fan fuel prices wise. And I was paying like $4 a gallon and driving, across the tunnel every day from Virginia Beach. I was like, this is stupid. So yeah, took a job that was basically right around the corner from the house. And 3 of my stuff kind of picked up from there. After that, just run down the career path real quick. I ended up doing a contract gig for about 2.5 years up in Hagerstown, Maryland, for Volvo. It's Volvo Mac powertrain. I was doing performance and emissions work for essentially over-the-road diesels.
Okay.
So 11, 13, 16 liters. some advanced projects where you're looking towards the future and things you can do and way to improve the engines, blah, blah, blah. Left there, went to go do engineering design work at Volvo Penta in Chesapeake, Virginia, where they do, there specifically is all the gas engines for basically boat use. And at the time, we were doing early testing in, I think we were beta and gamma series of the Gen 5 stuff. So the LT1, the 5.3 variant, whatever its name is, I don't recall, and the 4.3 V6.
Okay.
So going through all those and seeing the teething and the problems that GM was having, and you're sitting in the meetings with their engineers and hear some of the stuff they say, and you're just kind of learning, going, "Wow, this is not throwing anybody on the bus. I'd have done things differently in certain instances." So I told all my friends from the get-go with how many of them we blew up. I was, "Don't buy the first year of this new Corvette." Everybody wanted the new Stingray, and I was like, "Don't do it." The number of rod bolts and connecting rods we failed, I was like, "Stay away." Give it a minute to sort out. This same insider knowledge will pay off in a couple years as well. When I went to Roush Yates, ended up leaving Volvo Penta, went to Roush Yates. Basically got thrown on as being like the sole engineer initially, where full time was working on the 4GT race engine. At the time, it was under wraps. Nobody knew about it. It hadn't gone public yet. So working on the 3.5 on that one, was slightly overboard. So it's technically a 3.6 EcoBoost.
So that was is that the current generation, or
yeah.
Okay,
This was I moved down. So I moved to Mooresville in January 2015. So I've been here a little over a decade now.
Okay,
not counting when I moved across.
Not counting that.
Anyhow. Not counting that stint. But yeah, so hopped on, was doing that full time, and then in parallel with that was also the GT350 program. So the Voodoo engine, the 5.2 flat plane crank.
Sure.
And it was having all kinds of wild vibration issues from the get-go, from the factory. One of the really interesting ones is one of the teams was out testing the car, shaking it down like a first track day or something, and take the car out, do an initial shakedown, bring it into the pits, key it off, get tire temps, kind of check some things, see where your numbers are coming in. All right, go start the car up, and nothing. They're going, "What's going on?" Trying to figure out what's going on. It was vibrating so badly, in a starter motor at the end of it where you've got your brushes, and there's that little like braided copper cable that runs through the brushes so it touches the commutator and you actually get your current through it. It was shaking so badly, those copper cables literally vibrated into little copper balls that were rattling around in there.
Okay.
So we work on Monday, and there's a box on my desk with a starter taken apart and like a little baggie of copper balls. I was like, "Somebody gonna tell me what the hell's going on with this?" They're like, "Yeah, we need a solution. This thing's shaking that." I'm like, "Oh, good God, yeah." But yeah, I mean, it had those other things, and I told friends to stay away. Don't buy the first year; it'll get sorted out. Like it's improved a bunch from where it was. But for that one, it was a real simple fix. It was basically swap out the cap. We made a billet cap production. I think we would cast one. I don't recall. I ended up sending the part off to Ford, and they're implementing it. But basically just tied it into the box so that end of the starter, basically a big long node, wouldn't shake around and kill itself. But it had other issues, the oil filters and other things. I mean, old Ferrari race cars had the same sort of thing. The 360s and stuff. They'd screw on oil filters that would vibrate and come off, and you got a fire, and
that's a big problem with Honda K series. Grid Life bitches about it all the time. Like, make sure you got that shit tied down, because like they just vibrate the oil filter off and shit all their oil all over the track.
Well, yeah, it's an inline four. It inherently hates itself. I mean, make great power and all, but like as far as balance goes, like half stroke does not equal like half mass or half travel in terms of when we get into rod ratios.
It does not.
And so it's inherently imbalanced, which is why nice running inline fours have a balance shaft, but. Yeah.
Those are those things you delete in 4G63, right?
Yep. Yeah. Yeah. Just get rid of it. We don't need it.
It's in the way.
I feel like we've just gone through an hour.
What now?
I feel like we've been talking for an hour, and it's been 15 minutes of just like my jaw is on the floor. I've been writing all these things down that you've been saying, and just going, "Holy shit!"
I told you, like this story's crazy, right?
It's more than one.
So meanwhile, all this stuff's going on. I still had 3MI in the background.
Yep.
I really tried pushing it to become more like mainstream and actually carry products. So that was when I was at Volvo Powertrain still, like 2012-ish or so, 2011. And I bought like my first like big batch of like my tri-beam, X-beam connecting rods, whatever you want to call them. Designed those up and having Signs manufacture them for me. That ended up biting me in the ass because I knew how much I was basically paying for them, and I knew what the market would sell them for, and like I was making like nothing on them. It was like a passion project of I'm not making shit. I'm doing this wrong. Because prior to that, a lot of stuff had been bespoke. Like people wanted strokers and stuff from me. It was basically like one-off orders, and it was custom bottom in and custom piston. Everything was tailored to what you wanted, and that's what they got. And it was really low volume. And trying to bring things to the market in terms of volume, and it just it didn't work. I didn't have the buying power to get numbers low enough.
Well, not only that, let's be real. We're going to go through this a little later, but I think you have this passion for building or in putting tons of effort into something maybe 4 people will buy, but for that 4 people, it's the perfect thing.
Yeah,
Like
what's the joke? We
extremely
had a
low
joking
volume
business name
bad
for that
idea.
model.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was me, you, and Drew from Penguin Garage were joking about that. We're like, yeah, I'll buy 3 of them. But yeah, you get down there rabbit hole. For me, that's the fun part, right? Like, it's to optimize the thing, make it as good as you can do, push to the limit. In reality, that of course, knocks down numbers and drives up cost. And that makes fewer people that want it. Guys that get it absolutely love them. The guys that get them love them, and it's one of those things I realized at this point. I'm like, I need some things that actually pay bills. Let me change how I do this. But yeah, so when I moved to Mooresville, basically it all got stopped. Like I was working 12-hour days, cranking on the GT program, that sort of stuff. Like, I'm doing the motorsports for the living. I don't need to have it for the fun as well. The after hours hobby business. But yeah, so it kind of got timed out there. A fun one from the Ford GT program. So the engine that was used in the Daytona prototypes prior, very similar. Not a huge shakeup between the two. Obviously different internals and bits and bobbins, but like the basic architecture was the same. So when we first started, we were using the what they call the model year 17 engine, which is a new one. So it's new heads, new block, new all kinds of stuff. Ford was still going through them, having teething problems. I'm doing all the adaptations to make it a race engine, and I was the only full-time engineer on it at the time. And so as Ford would change, they'd say head casting. I'm going, well, it's 2 heads, right? So you get 2 new castings that come in, 2 new models, all the port work and geometry and valve seat, all the machining stuff you called out, all the drawings you've done are nuked now. So you have to do this thing all over again. On top of that, we converted them to being, basic, a more typical cam-driven, bucket operated high-pressure fuel pumps. We put them on both heads. So that's special machining that has to be done to cam caps, and a billet cap gets made to hold them, and all kinds of detail goes into them. And Ford kept doing these changes, kept having failures, and they've got an army of engineers, and it's like just me working on this. And so my boss and and Doug Yates himself are kind of like, yeah, this doesn't make sense. Like we got one dude, he's tied up every time you guys make a change because you're still having teething problems and cracking castings and having crap. So they decided to go with the model year 14 engine. Technically, it was a front-wheel drive designated SHO. Is what we used to go racing in the 4GTs.
Really?
Wow.
So yeah, it was an SHO engine basically. Obviously heavily modified and different crank and all kinds of other stuff done to it. But yeah, the base block and the base heads were that model year 14.
Wow.
Yeah, transverse, not longitudinal mounted engine. Which didn't matter because we mounted through the oil pan. We ended up having Daly make that. It was the design we had where the ears, basically went on the chassis up front and, trans on the back, and, there's no like side motor mounts or anything on it. Because it literally just
say that again. So
to the chassis.
In the show, it's transverse mounted because it's a front wheel drive car. So you did what exactly in the GT?
It put transverse mounted engine in it, longitudinally mounted though.
Yeah, okay, yeah, of course.
Yeah, and
so it's still longitudinally mounted.
If you were talking to Daly, that means Daly being the dry sump company. They probably made some sort of dry sump situation for you. And
so we ended up getting the pump from him. The sump design layout architecture was our own. Which we had billet caps on it, so the sump ended up replacing the main caps. O-ring dovetail thing all the way around the thing, and it kind of replaces the bottom end of the engine, if you will. Where the factory oil pump, a lot of stuff sits on there, block off plate because you don't need that. A lot of this is making it into a race engine, so you do a lot of adapting to block off the OEM stuff you don't need.
Yep.
Billet front covers and valve covers and, all the stuff you need. The GT ended up going those carbon covers and carbon intake manifold for weight. But one of the things that sucks is BOP. Like, the reality of BOP racing is terrible. So you get in it and, like, this is, like, my first, like, real motorsports engine job. Like, I'm designing this thing. Cool. Let's do all the things. Let's do bells and whistles. And one of the guys who was working there is Eric Peacock. Cool dude. He's been all over prior. old Nissan projects from the 80s, like the heydays of like Group C and IMSA and all
Ooh.
that sort of stuff. Like he lived through that, so he had all these cool stories and old button. He was kind of there dealing with the meetings between people and talking, be like, hey, we're looking at something like this, come up with something, that sort of thing. So he was cool to have, just a wealth of knowledge. But yeah, he's kind of like, one of the things that we're gonna run into, he's like, it's BOP. And I'm like, yeah, I mean, I get that, but like we could do this and save fuel and push up the compression ratio and yada yada yada. He's like, let's take the power away. Like, okay. I was like, he's like, so basically start off where you don't chase anything. Nothing's like astronomically fantastic. Because you're gonna throw restrictors at you and make too much power, they'll take away your boost. Most people don't realize you have to kind of like agree upon like there's a torque curve that you're gonna chase, and they limit your boost by like points along the way and what kind of power you can make. Maybe make too much, they take stuff away from you. So one of the problems we had is we'd start with like 38 mil wastegates. We ended up having to switch to 44 mil wastegates so we could run low enough boost pressure. Like it was wild. Like it's Redline we're pushing like I think it was long. This was a decade ago. Like 3.5 psi, something like that. Like nothing.
So you needed to
like,
bleed off
the turbos and intercoolers and all
pressure.
the extra shit at this point. Like
Yeah.
Oh
what's
my
that?
gosh.
Yeah. So you're carrying all the stuff around, and you have restrictors on it, and you're still making north of 500 horsepower, and you're running like 3 pounds of boost, and you're so you make the thing really efficient. You good crown shape, good cleaned up ports, cam specs, that sort of stuff. Nice intake manifold, nice exhaust manifolds, make all the things so the engine, the air pump itself works as a great air pump. So you throw a little bit of boost at it, and it wakes up and does a thing. But like you're kind of going, this is belittling. Like this is crap. There's really no reason to have these beautiful Garrett Motorsports turbos on here when they're doing next to nothing.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of stinks. And so you find that out. And one of the other things that happens is they'll limit your aero package. They'll also go in on to slow you down. They literally will change your fuel filling neck size. They'll also change your fuel tank volume. So all these things that they tune that most people don't realize behind the scenes in this type of racing, all these things get tweaked to equalize the field.
So
And,
you could
on top
build
of that,
essentially you could build the best possible package whatsoever, and they're just going to neuter you until you're back within the field. What they believe.
So you're as slow as everybody else. Yeah.
Yeah. So you just killed yourself to make this absolutely incredible engine for them to go.
Yeah.
Nah.
But yeah, it's one of those where like the type of racing, as the engineer side of me just died. You're like, it's really this bad. You're like, it's just a marketing thing. All right, cool. A driver has a good day and a team has a great setup, slightly better than somebody else's. That's who's going to win. So as far as the racing goes, of like watching the racing, the cars are so close with varying trade-offs of tire size and drag and that sort of stuff, right, to some extent. But their performance is pretty much balanced. So they're pretty darn close, and it really comes down to team and setup and that sort of stuff. And/or having a new car.
Not the first person to say this, yet you tend to be working on the engine side of stuff. Another buddy of mine, Ito, he works on like the Corvette IMSA programs and stuff like that in the aero side of it, and he says the same thing. He's like, we actually learned that if we try too hard, they're just gonna nail us for balance of power, or performance. BOP is gonna knock us down anyway. So we take that into account with how much effort we put into things, because sometimes you're just better off if you can get 90% of what you were trying to do with putting in 10% of the effort. It's probably worth it to go focus on other stuff
until you need to focus on something later, or until a problem comes up.
Sure.
Hypothetically, end up having an engine issue where you need to sort something out because there's some type of something happening. But yeah, and that's just it. And so that was it. Is realistically, it was kind of a 10% effort to get 90% of the goal done of what would be achievable. And it also keeps costs down and other things too. But like we were running those, and so for instance, where something did come back around, we started cracking the factory cast cam caps. So we ended up going to billet cam caps for them, which became its own nightmare because they're already lined home from the factory. They're having to do a whole special thing where you're literally scanning each cam cap to see the offset in the bore. So as most people out there understand, there's we talked about cam caps in like a Subaru. You can't reuse cam caps or mismatch cam caps because when the line bore is done, it's not obviously perfectly centered on the parting line. It's obviously not perfectly centered. There will be some degree of walk up or down, a slight angle to it, that sort of thing. Sizes might be slightly different. And so when you're trying to do all these cam caps to match an existing bore, it becomes quite a nightmare. At which point, Ford finally decided that, I think it was their Cleveland plant, one of their plant locations was going to let us go forward. Like they would literally do the machining for the cam bores on their line with the tool, and we just send the cam caps, and they'd go and hog them all out for like a year's worth of race heads, which was nice. But yeah, fixing that along the way was quite a nightmare. Really talented machinists who can knock it out, and you sit there with. And it was one of the really nice things as a design engineer is you can sit there and have a concept of something you want to do. It's kind of pushing the envelope. You run over to the machine shop, sit on machinists like, well, we could do that, and we could actually use this instead, and blah blah blah. You end up finding a workaround to do the thing that you didn't think could be done, but you needed to be done. And it's also a nice working relationship to anybody out there who's maybe a younger engineer. Have your ears open. Don't be a know-it-all. There's a lot of stuff you're not going to know and you're going to learn along the way, and you'd be blown away by what a machinist who's been doing this for 40 years has a roundabout way that could do the job that's not supposed to do it, but you can do it, sort of thing. So it's one of those things to glom onto and just soak it up. But yeah, so that was GT program, and then GT350 stuff, and then the next year kind of got pushed. Once all that was done and homologated, there's not really much to do, so you kind of get pushed on the NASCAR side of things. And the NASCAR side was nice because if you find a gain, you get to keep it, right? Like, here's our rule book thing, and keep the thing. We're not going to yell at you.
Yeah. A little less, a little different than like IMSA and sports car racing and stuff like that. So you got to play around with NASCAR a little bit. How long did that last? I didn't realize you did any NASCAR stuff.
Yeah, it was NASCAR's only about a year or so before I left.
Yeah.
But yeah. So there's the year or so of that, and then I popped off and went and did a quick stint at a place called MSI Defense. Doing DoD stuff. Basically, is the way I describe it is it's kind of like what Q Labs is to James Bond, they are to, like, I'll say, our special forces community.
Okay, cool.
Where you're literally talking about like things that hide away and pop up that like it's not quite missiles coming out of headlights or anything, but it was pretty wild. So it was an interesting short stint there before I went off and just decided to do consulting full time. That's when I really kind of stood on my own 2 feet and said I got the 3MI thing going, and 3D scanning services, reverse engineering, product design from prototypes to full production runs and anything along the way. Shops, you want something done. It's kind of like, is this something you want for the market? Is this something you kind of want to split and I get a royalty on, or is it something you want to own the rights to? I designed the whole thing, give you drawings, and send you on your way with the manufacturer, sort of thing. And it was kind of anywhere in between. So yeah, did that for a few years until I hopped on over to start Red Bull Powertrains.
That's so. What I want to know how this happens. Okay, how does one? Now, again, you've already dipped your toe into all sorts of stuff, and your resume looks badass right now. Okay, you've done IMSA shit. You built all sorts of cool stuff. You worked on NASCAR teams. You've worked with the Department of Defense. You've done all sorts of crazy shit. But how does a Formula One team, like, how do you make that contact? I'm assuming it's somewhere through the racing world, names were thrown around and whatever, but how does that happen, and how do you end up in the UK? And
so
what's kind of I knew through the, you don't mind me chatting.
I knew through the grapevine Honda was pulling out of Formula One, and no one was going to supply to Red Bull because obviously they pissed off Renault, and they were pissed at Renault, and Renault engines were lagging and left wanting, and
for them.
And then obviously Mercedes and Ferrari aren't going to want to give engines to their main competitor. Not willingly, especially when they have a little bit of beef. So yeah, it was through the grapevine that Red Bull is going to be starting their own powertrain team, and sure enough, they did. And I literally just applied like anybody else. Press up the resume, send the thing on the way.
It showed up on LinkedIn or some bullshit, and you're like, yeah, why not?
yeah. Basically, so job posting was coming up. Then it was like way early on. It was like just a generic, engine design posting. Sending my resume, what I'd done. Like, so when I was at MSI, I, was actually a basic project manager, engineering manager, and kind of was a hybrid role, also senior design engineer. So I got hired as senior design engineer, got moved to project manager. You have like a rotating team of, I don't know, between 5 and 12 guys underneath you at some point in time. So I had actual like on the job project management, team leading stuff outside of like, I was a Boy Scout and, had a troop leader, that sort of thing. But like real actual, doing projects, deliverable stuff, timelines, managing things, managing budgets, dealing with communications of various sides of projects, and kind of being the interface in the company, multi-department, work. And so, yeah, I had that, and then I'd kind of done several of those roles along when I started doing contracting work. One in particular was for a baby Elon Musk guy who wanted to do long-range autonomous delivery drones. that kind of got squashed by the FAA and the fact the guy wanted the thing to be like open source. I'm like, we can't open source this because have you heard of this group called ISIS? Like, we can't just share how to make a long range delivery payload dropping drone for your friends in like the French Indian Ocean, like, French islands and, the Indian Ocean or somewhere down the Caribbean. Like, that's not how this works. So anyhow, I applied for Red Bull. And yeah, kind of just dressed up the resume. Didn't dress up the resume, but literally just updated the resume that I hadn't really touched since I left the commercial world. And ended up getting a call and, hey, we're interested in an interview. We'll set it up. Here's who's going to be the guys interviewing you. And how's that? I'll say the interview was...
I got a question for you. At what point did you not... there's no way you didn't have some level of imposter syndrome because, like, here you are a few years ago, this high school kid who, garage turbocharged his 1.8 liter L, and now he's literally applying and getting a job at Red Bull Racing. When you're walking,
there's a lot that happened between those two.
I get it. Holy shit! Did you ever, at one point, you just go, "What the fuck, man?"
Yeah, so I remember specifically it was one night I'm doing the dishes when I was at Roush 8. It's actually just like my first year down here. I remember thinking, I was like, yeah, I saw postings in my feed, blah, blah, blah. Like, I'm cutting out level network. I was like, Ferrari was looking for essentially a design team lead for their engine program in Italy. I was like, yeah, I guess I'm do this long. Realistically, that's something I could do at Formula One. Like, holy crap, never really thought that would be like a reality. And of course, it's several years later that, I finally applied to it. And the interview is its own story, but and actually Subarus came up in it. But yeah,
okay, tell us more.
Job and moving over there, and
hell, if you can keep a Subaru together.
Oh,
I
want to know. Okay.
So in the interview, it ended up, man. Oh my gosh, I'll the premise. The interview was pretty grilling. Like, they take you to all kinds of technical aspects, this, that, and the other, from things.
Well, they'd have to.
And, oh yeah, I mean, I've done many interviews. Like, this was its own level. From things of explaining, nerdy engineering stuff about, SN curves and, stress strain diagrams. What's the difference between like a lab one and an actual like real world, stress strain diagram? What would it look like? The curves and the trends. And here's a compressor map. Can you explain to me things? Where's the surge line? That sort of stuff. What's this axis? What's that axis? What are these islands? All the bits and bobbins about it. Do you know how what a variable inlet guide vane does to change this? How does it benefit or hurt or hinder? Blah blah blah. Explain its benefits to the compressor and go through all this stuff. And when you get in the rabbit hole, they're like, all right, now real world scenario. Here we are. It's a race weekend, and we've got an exact same engine running on the dyno, just running miles and doing basically investigative research mile sort of thing. But we end up having a failure. It's 5 o'clock on a Friday of a race weekend, and what do you do? Like, you're in charge of this project. You're the team lead guy. Your guys design the stuff. Like, go ahead. And you kind of go through all the diagnosis you do, what you look at, how you inspect it, the type of failure, who's the manufacturer on the pistons, do we have the certs for the materials, do we have, you go through all these rabbit holes of things and end up getting down to it. All right, so you end up finding, like, you go all the way down the rabbit hole. They're willing to see how far you'll go in terms of knowledge. And you're trying to get to the answer that they want. And they just keep going, okay, cool, he's got that.
Yeah,
next step.
What's this bottom? They're just trying to see how deep you go.
Yeah. And they're just letting you dump your brain, diagnosing anything and everything, to the point I'm like, all right, so you realize it's a piston failure. It wasn't like you lost vacuum on something, blah, blah, blah. Because, the question is, how do they know that they lost a piston? Power dropped a little bit, and, they crankcase pressure went up. I was like, okay, well, it could be this, could be that, blah, blah, blah. All right, bore scope, have you done a leak down test on it? Start running through the stuff. All right. So, all right, team's going off and doing teardown. So they're pulling off the dyno, and you start doing teardown because you told them to go and do a teardown because the numbers are bad. It's a hole. There's something wrong. Go take the engine apart. Meanwhile, what are you doing? It's still Friday evening. I was like, all right, that's when I run back and I'm going to go and see, check manufacturing numbers and which pistons to get serial numbers off of what was into that build and, check certs on materials, make sure everything's spec. All right, cool. And they're like, all right, what now? All right, so you find out everything was done right, manufactured right, everything was to print, materials are great. Like, what's next? He's like, so, your piston failed. What do you do? And you go through this whole thing. You're like, all right, well, clearly we can't run that engine at that power because it's going to blow up. Like, you can't have that failure. So, all right, so how do you fix it? So you're sitting there like, well, Do we have a significant knock load or anything like that made it come back? No, it was pretty happy. And just ended up losing power. You're like, all right, well, crap. All right, so it's a fatigue failure. He's like, yeah. So all right, so how do you tell the team at the track what to do so they don't destroy the engine so they can make it through the race? And you go, all right, well, fatigue failure. You got to go back to like my SN curves. So for those who don't know, there, it's more or less when you have a given load and a number of cycles is when something fails. So the way you do it is you go, all right, well, we have to reduce the load, X amount so it goes Y distance cycles further so it can actually make it through the race. And so, yeah, you have to pull the power to save the thing so it actually make the race for that weekend until you can actually fix the thing. But like you go all the way down this rabbit hole, and it's like an hour-long answer is what it felt like. Dude, it was just grilled. And the next thing, they're all right, well, in a hypothetical world, you're driving towards the Grand Canyon. You're from America, you've got the Grand Canyon. It's like you're driving towards the Grand Canyon at 60 miles an hour. Is it quicker for you to hit the brakes or turn? It's like, well, the driver in me wants to go and say, I'm going to get on the brakes and start feeding some wheel in and turn. Like, yeah, I mean, we would all say the same thing, but nope, it's one or the other. If you need any formulas or anything you can't recall offhand, go ahead and, let us know. We'll give them to you. Solve the problem. So you're just getting the equations, balancing things out, canceling stuff, and find out that one's 2 times faster than the other. And it's that sort of stuff. So you're like, dude, I got done with that interview and down to my wife, and I was like, I have not been this brain dead since like finals in college. Like I'm just, holy crap, I just got grilled.
I bet you were fried coming home from that.
Well, I took it literally from the same seat I'm sitting right now. It's my upstairs office.
Yeah.
So it was all over internet too. So you got these 2 guys in England, interviewing you. But yeah. I walked downstairs like, I can't think straight for the rest of the day. I'm done. Like,
I'm done.
Yeah.
I'm gonna go watch
the other time you're also
doing
the interview thing, and you're doing the interview thing in the back of your head the whole time too, right? Like, I don't say anything stupid. Let me make sure. Okay, like double checking yourself, quadruple thinking everything you're gonna say before you say it. That also
that would be brutal. So you end up getting this job, okay? And honestly, let's be real. That was at probably one of Red Bull's lowest times. In at least recent memory. That was an ugly time frame for them coming off of they were all like kind of laughed at for going to the Honda power plant or the Honda based power plant at that point.
Because Honda had such a bad run with McLaren.
Well, yeah, they had an awful run with McLaren. I mean, memes and all sorts of stuff. We could go into everything that happened with Alonso. Let's not. Okay, so you guys did some really good work with that. I mean, you ended up winning championships and all sorts of stuff.
Well, that was that was Honda engine. That wasn't my engine, but yeah.
Was okay. Well, did you?
So I went over when Honda was going to be leaving. And really during the interview, this was August or September of 21.
Okay.
It's when, and at the time, what was agreed upon and understood was that Red Bull was going to be taking over Honda's IP, and that they would then be manufacturing and essentially taking over the Honda engines, and the Honda engines would become Red Bull engines, and that's what they would run. By the time my visa and everything went through and I showed up at work, that had already changed, and they're like, we are not getting Honda engines. Honda's keeping their IP. So here's the group of us who are here now. We've got blank sheets of paper and what's in our head. Let's start making an engine. And so that's kind of how that went. And at the time, you're also massively busy hiring up, right? It's like, so I showed up and they'd pre-hired a couple of guys for me, but only like 3 of them were there.
Yep.
So you're going, all right, I've got a team here and I still have to put job postings out and field through resumes and interview guys and make sure the project keeps moving and, do checks and sign off on drawings and releases and, double check our performance sim work. That's worked a lot with performance sim group because I was performance design team. And so by that, I guess I'll break down what that means. I was performance design team leader at Red Bull Powertrains, where largely we started off, you have the single cylinder engine because in Formula One, the FIA has dictated you have limited hours on running V6s and you have unlimited hours running single cylinders. So all of your development work and performance work, durability work, those sorts of things go into the single cylinder before it goes to the V6. So your team's really coming up with, new pistons, rods, cam design, port geometries, combustion chambers, crowns, the pre-chambers, all that stuff. You're literally running through it all. And the concept there is that what you find ends up getting passed along the V6 group. So all the design work going on with the team is then also of what I'll call the critical surfaces within the engine. So literally, in terms of how you build an engine is you start from the inside out. So your crown geometry, so your cylinder head for those who are not super engine nerdy. So where your valves sit and all that stuff in the head and the actual shape and volume of the chamber that you have, where you position the spark plug, with these being direct injection, where you place the direct injector, how it feeds the pre-chamber. So for those that don't know what a pre-chamber is essentially the spark plug is sitting inside of a bulb, and this bulb has multiple holes in it. So you have to get fuel into it, fuel and air into it. So when you spark spark your ignition, spark plug goes off. You then have a tiny combustion inside of this bulb that then shoots plumes, or if you want to envision like jets of fire come out of it, right? And that's what shoots across the top of the piston, across the chamber, to help you have a quicker combustion and to have you have a more complete combustion, particularly because these engines now run so lean due to the rule set. So you're starting all these crazy complex geometries and how they all interact with each other. And it goes back and forth between my team making the geometry and going to the performance simulation group, who literally runs the CFD, combustion analysis, all that fun stuff, 1D, 2D, 3D analysis of what you have going on. And so you have this iterative loop. So part of my team's just tied up doing surfaces with performance sim group. So you're checking to see where things are going. Well, could we push that there? We could do that a little bit. That's getting a bit risky on, how thick of a material you have behind the valve seat and the port, because it's getting laid over so much. Let's run over to the mech sim group and have them do like a real thorough FEA analysis on this, not like us doing a quick pass, but these are guys who are literally just experts in FEA. We'll run it to them, have them run through it. All right, that looks a bit iffy, but we'll go ahead and take the risk and we'll run it and see how it does, that sort of thing. So you've got this iterative loop going. You've got parts coming out all the time. You've got iterations going on. You've got a new dyno that's being built, that you have a designated engine that's not even your own engine, that is allowed to be run before you're allowed to run your single cylinder for the 2026 design time. So that engine's then also being babysat because it's its own project. So you have two complete engine projects going on at the same time to make sure this dyno can get commissioned, that it's reading right and properly and everything's going well. So yeah, it was total chaos. Like, I was 10 to 12 hours a day. I'd go in on Saturdays, do my own performance design work. Occasionally have to work a Sunday. Workload was crazy, but when you're a psychopath who loves it and you get so entrenched in it, like, you don't notice.
Not only that, was this just real quick? Was this the first time you got to design an engine from scratch? Like, really, be a part of the genesis of the motor, not like, hey, we're gonna turn this from this manufacturer into something. Like, this is the absolute genesis of this.
Yeah, this was the first. I mean, it wasn't just me. It was obviously
sure, it was a huge team. It was just was this the first time you got to be involved in that part of it. I bet you that was really interesting.
It was cool. And the big thing is, like, we had a lot of guys who came over from Mercedes at the beginning. My wife actually had a joke because it came up so often, and I hated it. It was the worst answer. I'd ask why something was being done a certain way, or why are we doing the coolant layout this way versus that way, and these sorts of things. And like, well, it's how we did it at Mercedes, and like became such a default thing. Or, well, that's how we did HPP. High performance powertrains is what they call the Mercedes everything. That's how we did at HPP, or that's how we did it at Merc, or that's how And so my wife's like, I'm just gonna make you a shirt that literally just says that's how we did it at Mercedes. ... And it was it was such a thing where I kept beating my head against the wall. Like, been a blessing and a curse in my career. I a lot of times see problems differently than other people. So a lot of times I'd come up and I'd say something like, that seems completely off the wall different, but no, there's something to that. Let's try it. Check it out. But yeah, so you'd be asking why it was done a certain way, but it was cool because you had people from all over the grid coming to start this thing at Red Bull. A lot of it being, I'm sure to some extent, because cost caps, so salaries are basically frozen. So then you get a bigger salary in Formula One as you go to another team where they're going to pay you more because they're going to pay for your experience. Whereas you get hired at a team and they hire you for your experience and you've been there a number of years, well, you're still frozen there because you're still the same guy, right? And I mean, this applies. I want to see the same thing happens in the real world too.
That's just in any job, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, that's in any job, but literally, like, there's no room to keep up with inflation.
There's no room to keep up or something along those lines. You have direct competitors. You know what I mean? Like, your experience directly contributes to that, and there's probably not that many situations. With I guess it depends on your on what you do for a living, your profession. But yeah, I could totally see, like, if you're hopping around teams a bunch, you're gonna keep getting raises.
Yeah. And the other thing is there are also only so many openings. Like, you look at Formula One,
sure,
like, a team, not counting powertrains manufacturing side, right? So like we'll just say a car side team. You're talking a couple hundred people to probably 500 or 600 for like the bigger teams. Like that's the entire staff. That's HR. That's everybody. That's all your engineers. That's the guys who build the cars. That's the guys who measure things. That's the guys who do QA. That's everybody. So you got 600 people. You go, all right, we'll multiply that by 10. All right, cool. There's 6,000 people. And you go, well, how many powertrain manufacturers are there? Okay, powertrain side is roughly about the same number. And you go, all right, we're talking like there's less than 10,000 people in all of Formula One in the world. So there are only so many openings, particularly when you go, that's every job. That's from the caterer to the HR person to the custodian to like the guy who's in charge of, the powertrains team or the team principal. So it's pretty small world in that regards too. So openings, they happen, but it's usually somebody or it opens and they knew you and you slide your thing in and slide your resume on over and then you get your garden leave and get iced for a year or 2 years. Yeah, I figured I shouldn't say slide your thing. Slide your resume on over.
I'll roll with it.
Yeah. You don't need any blurry pics being shared on WhatsApp. So yeah. But yeah, so the gardening thing's kind of cool. And then literally they just pay you to like go home and tend your garden is the British phrase.
Yep.
So like when I left, I had a year of I was done 6 months of garden leave. So yeah, kind of came back here and had a paid gig for a while and started getting the wheels rolling on 3MI again, and yeah, so that was a really cool gig. I mean, there's more stories to it, there's more stuff, but yeah.
Oh, obviously. I mean, we literally could be here for forever. But your story's incredible because, like I just said, and this is one of the things I really hope doesn't get lost, but I think it is getting lost in some of the modern day community, is how excited you were in the beginning to mess around with your Impreza L base model thing and turn it into a homemade WRX, and what you learned from that, and then where that took you. The not just the Subaru community, but your experience messing with that got you into this other thing, and you went to college because of your interest with all of this. It all snowballed into all this insane experience, and I think the story's incredible. You hear guys talking about wanting to get into this. Well, I think you're a perfect example of somebody who has done it, and they they should probably look at your example on if they were looking to start a career in this, some of the directions you've taken. So I always, your story is incredible to me, and I've told multiple people this. I'm like, bro, the Subaru community has created we sent people all the way to Formula One. So I don't know.
Well, I appreciate the kind we send people to Formula One. Yeah. I've been NASCAR and Subarus, and that's part of what came up in the interview was the guy who ended up being my direct manager there. So Chris is his name. He'd asked specifically, he's like, so Subarus, what made you get into them? I explained the whole WRC thing. He's like, all right, that makes sense. He's like, I had one in college, blew a head gasket, sold the car, band-aided it, sold the car before it became too bad and didn't deal with it. And he's like, so what made you get into Subarus, the WRC thing? How'd you go far down the rabbit hole? And he's like, those engines. I was like, yeah, I know there's issues with them, but kind of makes it fun. There are things to fix, right? So you find the solutions that keep them together and keep them running. And it's kind of fun to have an engine that you never have to touch or tinker. Your growth is limited.
I agree.
So if you decide to put cams and a bolt on LS, you just go run it until it's clapped out. You're not gonna learn anything.
That's being really generous, but Subaru engines they're not an LS. They've got their positive quirks, but it's wild to me that the suffering you endured, this guy who's your boss, had the complete opposite outcome as you, which is, okay, blew the head gasket against, essentially, I'm out of Subarus. Meanwhile, you went deeper into the rabbit hole, deeper into the suck, and you still made it to Formula One.
I'll say one of the big things that I've noticed is in terms of the hands-on experience I have here versus what most of their guys have there. So after college, this is when I was have been during Bush vacuum timeframes, I think. Had been before that. I was moonlighting at a machine shop. So literally after hours, after work, I would drive to essentially work 2 to 3 hours at a machine shop where I was learning how to run the machines and valve seats and end up, CNCing my own, sleeves, or not CNCing my sleeves, but CNCing my block. So go ahead and drop, dart and sleeves into another big bore destroker and that sort of stuff, like way down the rabbit hole. And so the hands-on stuff, even to the tune of like, here in America, most of us live in a house with a garage where you can have tools and you can work on stuff. It doesn't exist in England like that. It really doesn't. Like the accessibility of being able to have a toy car that you can buy and have a place to work on it when it blows up, it's just not there. So I think that's a big part of the trade-off too, and I would likely say a good bit of why I stood out is that you do have that hands-on, play with it, tinker it, try a thing, test it, see how it worked side. So I don't know, just differences in different countries,
different approach, different community styles.
Yep.
I think some of it has to do with our easy access to a lot of stuff, and I think some of that is even just space. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Like
that's what I mean. Like
when we have places to put old shitty cars.
Yeah, correct. Like you look at people that live in like flats over there. Like, all right, so you got an apartment. There's no garage. There's no parking for shit.
Yeah, where are you gonna leave the project?
The super rich have a house and a tiny garage and a tiny driveway. That sort of thing.
Yeah.
Wow.
And I shouldn't say super rich, but the people who are quite wealthy. The stupid rich are always the stupid rich. But like your normal guy who's like an engineer over there, yeah, you might have a house with a tiny garage. That's it.
So when you were over there, you picked up a WRX. You picked up a wagon, did you not?
I picked up a 1998 Subaru UK Turbo 2000. Yeah, it's basically the WRX. Yeah, so I've got a GF8 now to go along with my.
Did you keep it?
In my sedan. Yeah, actually, currently it's still over there. The fine gentleman at Roger Clark Motorsports have it in storage for me, so I just need to get the paper done and ship it over.
Small world.
Yeah,
I got to meet them. They are some fantastic dudes. I like them a lot.
That's cool. Yeah, JJ was just over there recently too. Says they're awesome.
Yeah. For what for how small their space is, man, their shop is beautifully put together, and the stuff they get through it's really cool to see.
How is the community over there, as far as Subarus in general? What's that community like?
I didn't get out there. Like, to me, it was pretty much dead. I joined like UK Subaru groups and stuff.
Yeah.
Like you go to races, you'd go to like time attack events and stuff. They'd come out in swarms. But it wasn't like you'd have like a local, like it's a Thursday night meetup, we're gonna go meet at Buffalo Wild Wings or something. That didn't seem to exist.
Somebody told me it's like the current Honda community is here.
Like the Honda community doesn't do that at all?
Yeah, the Honda community really doesn't until there's like an event, and then like you can't believe how many there are. They come out of the woodwork. And it's still like a thriving community. People are still spending money and doing stuff, but you don't see them around until they bring their car out. It's
like you show up to like time attack at Brands Hatch or something, and there'd be a swarm, like an entire section of communities. Everybody's sitting there doing the two steps and bouncing off rev limbers and anti-lag stuff as you'd expect. Bunch of Yahoo Subaru guys, but and then they show up in swarms. And meanwhile, the time you're living over there, like you never see another one. Like so many people thought it was wild that I'm driving a classic, as they call them over there. I'm driving around a classic Subaru. Like you're bonkers, dude. Like you can't drive in emissions controlled areas without paying a massive fine. You can't take it anywhere. It gets terrible fuel economy. So you're paying like between $10 and $11 a gallon, roughly. Equivalency of fuel prices over there.
Here.
So yeah, the fact that I'm flogging a GF8 through all the roundabouts in Milton Keynes, getting like averaging, I don't know. I'm probably lucky to get 15 miles a gallon because it's all stop and go. All the roundabouts, literally, I'd have like, depending which way I went to and from work, it'd be between like 9 and 13 roundabouts each way, and it's like a 10-minute drive, if that. So the other thing that's wild over there, so the way I don't know if anybody's listening, if you go to the UK, they largely have for the entire country, the speed limits are set by the road type that it is. So the fact that you have like 4-lane, thoroughfare, like to us to be like random road going through suburbia, right? 2 lanes each way.
Sure.
Because they have it laid out, they don't have, so many roads and streets intersecting. You kind of have the road goes and you have a separate part where you kind of pop off to go to the neighborhoods and speed limits change there. So like you're just driving like what would be, this 4-lane road that's in front of my neighborhood. The speed limit's 70 miles an hour.
70?
Not on the interstate. So you're just going from one roundabout to the next roundabout, accelerating up to 70 to slow back down to, in my case, I got really good at timing like the gaps, and I'd see it, and I just go bombing the thing like 30, 35 miles an hour, depending on the size of the roundabout. Dude, I had one coworker, he yelled at me at the summer party. She came up, I'm sitting there talking with my boss, Chris, we're having a good time. Because Chris had joked me early on, he's like, the thing about the roundabouts is figuring out how quickly you can take them. Like, that's really the goal. I was like, okay. And I mean, we have them here, but they're not the same as like a UK roundabout. No one knows how to use the blinkers, indicate, merge, and shit. Over there, everybody knows how roundabouts work. And yes, I'm sitting there talking with Chris at the summer party, and coworker comes up. She's like, "You're the one who takes the roundabouts too fast all the time. You almost killed me." I was like, "What are you talking? I've never had anyone honk at me when I take a roundabout." And she's like, "Why do you drive so fast?" And I just kind of pointed at Chris, and he's a tall dude, so I kind of look up at Chris. And was like, he told me that was the goal." And she's like, and she just stormed off, and I was like, "All right, well." I was like, "All right." I was like, "I'm in trouble now." Yeah, there's one time I had the self check, like poop your pants in the morning sort of thing. I was leaving, half asleep, going to work, and I go back to the false American thing. This is early on when I was there, and I'm not looking left. I'm looking right at the roundabout, sort of, or not. Wasn't looking right. I was looking left. And Pixie was coming, so I can go, and also I'm like, "Oh shit, that's right. They're coming from the other way." Like,
oh
yeah.
no.
Slam on the brakes. Sorry, we're good. Roundabout moment.
That was Yankees.
Damn Yank.
I'm gobsmacked, as the British would say.
So
one of the other real interesting things on the Subarus. So I don't know how many guys out there have driven JDM cars. For those that have a JDM car, like the blinkers on the right hand side, the wipers on the left, like it's reversed.
Yeah.
From our cars. The UK cars, the blinker is still on the left and the wipers are on the right.
Yeah,
so it's just like you get in and outside of the controls.
Dude, that'd be so nice.
Yeah. So you get in and like your immediate controls are the same as like you'd have in a US car, more or less.
Dude, what you just did was convince me. You just convinced me to go digging around in the UK to look for a gray market car now.
Yeah, they're there. As long as you stay away from the STIs. Actually, if you get wagons, STI wagons aren't bad. So like you can find like version 5, version 6 wagons over there. But again, if it's a version 5, version 6, it's actually a JDM import, so it'll be right hand blinking.
Yeah.
If you get an actual UK over there, the UK models are like us with bug IWXs, right? Like you can get them for a couple grand, no big deal.
Yep.
So
it's crazy.
Yep.
So I want to go back. I want to chat about destroker stuff. Okay. Your history is incredible, and I am happy we got to go through that, because I'm going to end up having you back on the show a couple more times. But you and Dom are sitting in a kitchen bullshitting about the 2.5. Like, where did this go, and what did the math end up coming out for you? Like what made you decide to, because if, as far as I know, you were the first person to actually put one of these together and actually get it running. Okay. Like, I have never heard of anybody doing a destroker earlier than you. You and Dom.
Dom was one of the early ones too. He got him going out of NPS.
It was like U2's like little collab is where it came from. So I it's probably not fair, but I kind of like look at you two as almost the same person when it came to putting this together. Because it was both bad idea.
I'll say there was another guy who was early on with them, but he was running standard rod, standard piston, so his quench height was massive. Because you had that 2 millimeter difference in height. But for those that don't know, quench height is where, or squish height is also how it's commonly referred to, is how close your piston gets to the cylinder head when it's at top dead center. And so because you're taking 4 millimeters of stroke out, essentially it's 2 millimeters per side. So when it's thrown all the way up, piston's all the way up top dead center, because you don't have those 2 millimeters compared to the EJ25, you have a 2 millimeter gap between the piston and your head. Makes compression ratio stupid low, makes flame kernels really slow, your ignition slow, all kinds of other things. But there's a guy who was like Street Bike Mike or something like that. It was another guy who started doing.
I think I remember that. Yeah.
Yeah, something along those lines. But yeah, that would have been with Dom. I think it was 05 or 06. I think it was 06. Yep. It's a while back. I have to remember when he was stationed, because
it had to have been right in that area, because that's when you guys started talking about destrokers,
stroker, long rods, and all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, because it was pretty soon after that I when I was working at Six Star for a customer, we actually ordered an engine from Dom way back in the day, and that it turned out pretty wild. Yeah. So yeah, that was so either way,
Yeah, so
you ended up going with a longer rod setup. Yeah.
he threw out the idea, and I started diving into, bottom end and geometries and what you could push around and what you could do, and kind of spacing on things and what you could realistically fit. And I went a little bit different than what most do, which of course in this case costs you more because now it's a rod that can only be used in a destroker or a really like extreme like low powered EJ25 build, or I should say 79 mil stroke build. Is I went to a +4 rod. I reduced the wrist pin to 22 millimeter pin. I was immediately committed that I'm going to go ahead and based on numbers and some, I'll say some flow bench values that I had because I had a flow bench at university that I could use. I found some real perks and gains going to a 4-inch bore as well as a great ring package and other stuff. And so the 4-inch bore also coincidentally ends up being a 2.43, which gets confused a lot with a 2.34, which is a D-stroke 99 and 99.75 bore.
Okay, hold on. So what is a 4.3 then?
So the 4.3 is a 4-inch bore, or 101.6 millimeters, if that helps.
Okay, and what stroke is the standard to?
So it's still the 75 millimeter stroke, so it's still de-stroked.
Okay.
So the standard rod on a Subaru EJ, I'll talk turbo cars in this regards. I'm not going to count like the 25D and the 251. They're their own separate thing. We'll just talk turbo cars. So your standard turbo cars, both EJ20 and EJ25, both use a 130.5 millimeter rod length. They also, in standard, use a 23 millimeter wrist pin. And then the difference there ends up being the compression height, which is, for those that don't know, it's basically from the top of your piston, or the crown, to the center of the wrist pin. And that's how you measure your compression height. So they have a difference there where it's a 32.7 on the WRX, and then a 30.7 or 30.8, depending on whose numbers who's measuring, on the EJ25s. So you're 255, 257. And all EJ20s are the same, by the way. Like you're talking like old 20Gs and 205s, 207s, etc. They're all that same base geometry numbers. So what I ended up doing is I ended up putting in a +4 rod, so 134.5 millimeter rod. So I took stroke out, right? So I essentially took 2 millimeters off the top of your stroke if you think where the piston lives above. So I do all of this thinking in reference to top dead center, so you get that stack up from your deck. So because now I put an extra 2 millimeters in, right? So I took 2 away from stroke, but I put 4 into the rod. I took an additional 2 out of the piston. So I went to a 28.7 millimeter compression height piston, which by now is pretty much the standard in the aftermarket. 83 mil stroker guys can run it. A +2 rod on an EJ25 can run it. That's like it fits in various things. It can take a lot of abuse and live. At the time, I was hesitant, went to a 22 millimeter pin, so I could keep an extra 0.5 millimeter in ring package and ring land. Although because I went to the 4-inch bore, I could go to some really nice thinner rings and nice coatings and materials because 4-inch bore at the time was used by all the domestic world, which was still heavily supported. I mean, it still is now, but our imports have more support now than they had then. And then the other thing I found with the 4-inch bore on the flow bench is I had really good discharge coefficients on basically when I started running valves and doing some valve geometry checks.
So when you were doing a proper 4-inch bore, though, you were having to do that with sleeves, correct?
Correct.
Yeah. So just so everybody's aware, that is not happening on your typical closed deck or something like that. That's one of the
That's why I haven't heard of it. I was like, where is this combination coming from?
You could put this giant ass bore in there and get away with it. So his early D-strokers were wild. And he could try all sorts of wacky stuff because, I mean...
Well, when you design it yourself and tell someone to make it, they're like, all right, we can make that. You got a drawing? Cool. Yeah. Because we don't know what it is otherwise, that sort of thing. So now, if you ever wanted to do this, like if anyone ever want to go the sleeved route, Barton has 2 EJ25 part numbers. One's a larger bore than the other. It has a larger outside diameter, so you can actually open up the inside diameter more. So just anybody who's listening to this and might want to start playing tinkering, just be aware they're 2 different sizes. So but yeah, the closed deck has largely become the adopted and easy route to go. So yeah,
you're hardly ever going to hear me go sleeving is a good idea in Subarus. It's pretty rare that you get one that the sleeves don't drop no matter how good they machined it. You may have pulled it off, but it's rare.
I will say that the one thing I had learned is on the initial sleeving, you definitely leave the liners proud.
Yeah.
they definitely stay proud of the deck because that aluminum is going to compress to some amount. Even if you properly install it and it's things pressed and clamped,
Sure.
you nitrogen chill the sleeves, you heat up the block, you drop them in, you've got the Loctite, I don't know, the green Loctite stuff that they give you to put into it. You have the whole thing, you press it down, you have it locked and literally secured. And one of the big things to do when you're actually doing an installation like this is you leave it clamped and pressed until it actually comes to thermal equilibrium. Because otherwise, the sleeve getting hot can kind of push itself out a bit and this sort of thing. And that's where dropped sleeves are an actual thing, is because the sleeve now pushed out, so it's not actually seated. So when you go ahead and clamp the whole thing together, it's got room to work its way down, and that's bad. And so that's why when you have it all clamped up, and if you leave the sleeve proud a little bit, I'm not going to say an exact number, but you leave the sleeve proud a little bit, when you first torque it all up, one, you get really, really, really good seal on your head gasket because you're literally wrapping the combustion chamber around the sleeve, much like you do in safety wiring ahead, that sort of thing, to some amount. Or not safety wiring, but wirings, old school stuff.
Fire
Fire lock, or they also say the fire lock rings, as IAG calls their stainless steel inserts. Similar sort of concept. So this part sticks up slightly proud of the gasket. The gasket, your coolant and oil passages, much lower pressure. But yeah, so what will end up happening is that sleeve will end up, as the block gets hot, the aluminum gets soft, you have the load, you have the heat cycles, it will settle down some. But yeah, that's a big ticket there.
So either way,
it's really easy to get closed deck.
Just for 99% of people out there, you're better off just get a deck closed.
Don't even bother. Yeah. And in reality, the big difference is for, again, like that 99%, like it's the 90%, 10% rule we said before, right? Like, well, I could just do I could just go a 132.5 rod and a 30.7 compression light piston that's off the shelf, and I could have a cheap destroker and a closed deck, and it'll be a 2.34. So, close enough on displacement. 0.1 liters, not that, not that big of a deal, right? And so you go, all right, you're right. You got 90% of it for 10% of the effort. Your bottom will be a bit heavier. You won't quite have as much dwell at top dead center and other things, and you won't have the same discharge coefficients. Your heads won't flow quite as well, but there's all the minute things. But again, you got 90% of it for a fraction of the
you're
work.
Also, you're way ahead from a lot of the, you picked up an ass load of displacement from an EJ20, just due to bore, and plus that larger bore is really happy with ethanol. And you got rid of a lot of the rod ratio goofy stuff going on with a 2.5 liter. So it's still a lovely cross.
And I'll say, like, the 4-inch bore one, another part of me really like the 4-inch bore is I only lost 32 cc's. So, 0.032 cc's from the EJ25. So, like, you don't even notice the difference. Like, displacement's all there. But you've got all the revs and this bottom end that wants to go to 10,000 RPM.
Warranty, were you around when we were messing with Gangster's car?
Yes, but I don't remember if I was around if he ever did sleeve.
So Gangster had one of those engines.
Okay,
so that's what he was running. So yes,
destrokers
do work. Destrokers absolutely do work in drag cars.
Was it Raleigh? The White Bullet or whatever? He's a destroker. Has been for like years. I don't know. He might not be now anymore, but he was for a long time.
I know we tried it.
Yeah.
So
he switched to it and ran it, and he's fastest. If I recall, he still has the record, I think, for the fastest manually shifted Subaru drag car.
Yep.
That is an EJ and all-wheel drive and all the other little thing. A Subaru as it's intended to be, Subaru drag car.
Sure.
Yeah.
I'm
not talking like a solid rear. Like I'm trying to remember was the I can't think of the name out of Australia. The guys who had like the old Brumby, the Liberty. The Brat with the solid axle swap and like a Power Glide or some other shit. I'm like, yeah, that's okay. I mean, that's cool. Go have fun, but that is its own record now.
Yeah. At what point is it not a Subaru anymore? So one of my favorite conversations I ever had with you, and it's one of the reasons one of our secret Facebook chat things started. So you were following, even when you were still doing Red Bull crap and you had a million things going on, you still kept in contact with the Subaru community, and you were following Time Attack pretty closely. Now, I also want to make sure we have a conversation about your former Time Attack experience too, because you guys did some really cool stuff with that also. But you had been following along and heard about the whole DCT in an S2000, a BMW DCT in an S2000 thing, and that pissed you off to no end. So you went down the rabbit hole to figure out how we could shove a GTR transmission in an R35 GTR, basically trans torque tube whatever front diff inside of a GC, and we technically could have kept it in street mod. You still want to do that?
Yes, we went down the rabbit hole. Well, and the other one too. I looked at the other one I looked at too was still the BMW DCT, but using the Nissan transfer case. So yeah, I looked at the two options, but yeah, the R35 I think would have hands down been the way to go. But yeah, yeah, I ended up having a local GTR shop I reached out to, and Charlotte's got quite the motorsports.
Dude, you started scanning and everything. You had scans.
Yeah, dude, I drove down to Charlotte. Hop in the car, R35 trans. The dude's like right there scanning away. He's got an R32 trans there if you want to scan that too. And like, I'm just all right. And I'm going to town, scan these things, come back, pop in the car, scan the underside of a car. My buddy Garrett Holler, he had his I don't know if any of you guys follow him, Holler Customs guy. Yeah, he's doing his own like sheet metal, well, actually more WRC fenders than 22B fenders. The dude's like super gifted sheet metal dude, big time Subaru nerd. He's actually right here in Mooresville now. He moved from Vermont. He was involved with like Vermont Sports Car or something as well, or maybe it's Dirt Fisher Rally. He's got some background up there. Yep. But yeah, so he's got his car up on like rally jacks. I'm like, shit, can I come scan the underside of your car? Because like that's way more room than I have under my car in my garage. And so I roll over there and start scanning the inside of his car, this, that, the other, get the trans tunnel, figure things out, we're in your package crap. Yeah, way down the rabbit hole just because I was pissed. Yeah,
dude, mad.
I was like
I've never seen this. He was more mad about the rule than I was, and everybody knows how mad I was about it.
I mean, I don't know if I was so much mad, but I was really, for me, it was more, I think it was more the genuine curiosity of like, well, can I shove this in here? And like, you want to make a stupid rule? Well, I'll show you stupid. Like,
yeah, we're going down the rabbit hole now, homies. And we actually figured it out to where what would have happened is it would have pushed the EJ back. The diff would have went in the front. The trans would have been in the rear, and you even figured out we didn't really have to massage the rear all that much to shove that trans back there. We would have drastically improved weight distribution in the car. It was ridiculous. We almost pulled the trigger on it too, because I got pretty close to getting a couple of people willing to come on with sponsorship and try to help fund that. We almost went down that rabbit hole.
I'll say the kicker was the amount of work you had to do the factory cross members. But if I recall now, like tubular cross members, are easy peasy. Like, yeah, but
that was going to be rough.
Yeah,
but I mean,
that was a big hack up. But
what are you going to do? So what are you messing around with these days? What do you have for your own cars?
Oh goodness, for my own cars?
Yeah.
Oh boy.
You still got your stranded in the UK, GF wagon.
Correct. So the GF8's in the UK, and I just need to sit down and do paperwork and pay the government money and the freight people money and just get the thing moved over here. I've got my Bug Eye. I picked that up in Hagerstown. It's just a lot of little hand-me-down parts and stuff from previous stuff. So it's got like BC springs and let's see, it's got old STI cams with the sodium-filled valves. Ported the head just because I said screw it. Port the head. Had Clint over at Turning Concepts do a valve job for me. Little 2-1 stroker in it just because it was a daily beater. And, I had parts laying around. EJ25 cranks, obviously, because how many times I put 75mm stroke cranks in that?
You just got that laying around.
Yeah, just sitting around. Dude, I've got more blocks and stuff sitting around. But yeah, so it's got EFR turbos for it, so old IndyCar takeoff, so 6758 and 7163. Depending on the day and the flavor. It's basically that's the quote beater. Then I've got my coupe, my 96 coupe that is currently sitting with a half cage in it. I was gonna make it the race car, but the way coupes are getting rare, I'm kind of don't want to go beat on a coupe. Like it's really clean, rust-free chassis. Like
yeah,
it's kind of a waste. But I also don't have the interior because at the time I was like, it got all stripped out because I'm going racing. Like So that's all gone. Then I've got my 94 sedan that was going to be a chump car project. That actually is at my buddy Tim's house that I actually need to pick that up because that thing's been there far too long. I need to get it back here, and that'll probably be the next toy I actually play with.
Nice.
Because I need to go racing. I'm at the point like I've been removed from like actually being in the seat so long, like you don't have that jonesing drug addict interest anymore. But like you want to do it, and as soon as you get back in it, you're going to be hooked again. So I need to get it going.
Have you heard about Grid Life? I think Grid Life is ripe for an ex-Formula One engine designer to come in and just hurt feelings.
Well, see, we bounce. You have no idea how many bad ideas, like myself, Graham, and a couple other people, we bounce all sorts of bad ideas off of him. and what's really crazy is it could be like, you could be down the rabbit hole in 1 a.m, and if you dump it in that chat, about 2 a.m, you're going to get a response because he probably he's like, damn it! Now his brain's on and he just starts thinking.
Don't get it before bedtime, otherwise I'm going to be like, shit, I have to go sit.
You absolutely have to watch the power you wield with that because he will ruin his own life to answer the question because ADHD won't allow him to chill.
Oh, yeah.
Like I totally love, yes, weaponized ADHD there for sure. But yeah, it's like Grid Life. I would totally love to do it. Like initially, I think we're as a privateer, street mod probably would be all the further I could go with budget. But the reality is like street mod right now.
Well, hell, street mod has gotten nuts now too.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Street mod has gotten to such a crazy extent. Like it's no longer really that like. All right, that'd be my level of time attack. So seeing about street class, but I'm like, all right, well, I'm gonna put a VF22 that I'm sitting around on like a EJ20 and just go flog it. Yeah, it'd be great seat time.
I think it's the answer personally. I've been saying that for a while.
But the thing that I really want to do is
that L and go run street.
I really enjoy wheel to wheel racing. Having done lemons and chump car stuff.
Sure.
Like wheel to wheel is fun. Like GLTC looks like a freaking blast.
Dude, I tell you what, Adam Wood, who was in the chat, I'm not sure he is anymore, but he's constantly in the chat. Like you two would be a dangerous combo. Adam runs in GLTC with he unfortunately wadded it up the last event, but ran with a base model Impreza Coupe in GLTC and was really starting to get that car figured out. And that thing was a total riot, and it was competitive. It was easily top 10 competitive if you put your laps together.
Go with?
He was a 2.5 with a 6-speed. He did it specifically to try to make extra torque. So he put it together cheap too. Like he didn't put serious effort into it. Like more thought would have probably helped him. I think you two working together could do some incredibly dangerous stuff. I'd really like to see you come out more this summer with this initiative we're putting together with Subi Speed of trying to get all the Subarus in one spot and working together and sharing data and trying to help each other. And I think even if you were to just come hang out for a couple of events and then like poke around a little bit, I'm pretty sure it's going to send you right off the deep end, and it's like, basically introducing you to heroin. But I think you'd have a good time.
Yeah, like Kershaw, South Carolina. So CMP is not too far from. Last year I wanted to go, except we ended up having life things scheduled over top of it. And I was actually just now going to pull up to see what the schedule is this year. Are they back at CMP this year?
They are doing CMP again. I don't know if I'm going to make it or not. We don't technically have tickets or anything for it right now. We're not sure if the car is going to be together. But we're, I never say never on stuff like that. Yeah. But that would be a great one to start at. I think no matter what, I'm physically still going to be there. So if anything, we can get you introduced to the right people.
Yeah. And so, the thing is, I like GLTC, I like Grid Life. The problem I have is being essentially East Coast, like every race. If you want to do a series championship, dude, that is a lot of time and money just in the drive.
Absolutely.
Like that's kind of the hang up from here. Like I know it's very much midlife centric. That's where Midwest centric, because that's where it started. That's where a lot of its roots are. But like short of them, they had popped over to Atlanta before the whole hubbub with
Well,
that
now we
happened.
got Atlanta's back this year, which is
Oh, is it?
awesome.
Okay.
Yep. So now you have Atlanta,
It's like 4
CMP,
hours.
Lime Rock, Mid Ohio. Like you can run a season off of that.
Yeah, like from where I am, like VIR is 2 hours, CMP is like 2 hours and change. Road Atlanta's
Yeah.
4 hours. Like it's pretty convenient. Some really nice, just seat time. But
You're actually closer to a bunch of tracks than I am now that I'm out
yeah.
in the middle of nowhere, Tennessee. So
Yeah.
So
How far are you from Corvette Museum?
like 3.5.
That's not too bad.
It ain't too bad, but I wish my buddy Matt still worked there because my buddy Matt still worked there. I'm just like, hey man, I want to go turn some laps. He's like, all right, well, be here around 6 and don't tell anybody.
Yeah.
Hmm.
It ain't like that
Nice having
anymore.
friends. Yeah.
That was helpful. I went up there and helped them with a few of their like super. They had this cool program that was like pre HPDE, like, hey, I want to get on the track, but I have absolutely no idea where to start, or I have no driving experience whatsoever. And they
Right.
had this program, and I was helping them with that, and that was a lot of fun. But yeah. So, dude, you got a hell of a history. Um,
Yeah.
you've worked with a few things. You even worked with the Turn-In Concepts time attack car back when they were running like Redline and all that, right?
It was into Redline. It's when Global Time Attack had
That
already
was
kind of
right
taken
when
over.
Global started.
Redline
Then,
had died.
yep.
Wow.
Yeah, so I was the reason they switched from Street Class, where they'd won the championship, to going to Unlimited.
Yeah.
That full of bad ideas.
Yep.
So they switched, and I mean, realistically, the car didn't change a whole lot just because budget was small. So we did what we could, drove up, with at the time what my resume was and their resume and their followers and that sort of stuff. 3MI Racing came on as a sponsor, and we basically did a big overhaul of what stuff we could. Most of it was always powertrain oriented, fuel cell, move the radiator to the trunk, some other things that are just like not super expensive.
Sure.
Still a 6-speed manual, which at the time, like everybody's looking at, sequentials and like, that'd be great. They're 40 grand. I'm not touching that.
Yeah, at the
But yeah,
time it was insane to put a sequential in a car.
yeah, and I mean, that car was still heavy too. That car was still
Yeah.
over 3,000 pounds. Like, I don't know how the car weighed so much from what was on it. But yeah, it was good. So they'd ran at UTCC, Ultimate Track Car Challenge. It's the only real track we kind of had like 2 years in a row running it. So they ran there with their street car setup. So I think it was like a 3076 or something like that.
Yep.
And
They actually ran one lap of America with that, and were in the running for a while.
Yeah,
Until
that
they
was early on before it went like aero
Man,
package
that
and
was
all
one of
kinds
my
of stuff.
favorite stories. Was all of us watching that on Nasiak, like constantly hitting refresh throughout the day to see what was going on because they were updating it on Nasiak the whole time.
Yeah, and the car was pretty limited in reality, like as far as
Mhm.
it was rolled fenders, and the front fender was really cut and like kind of riveted onto the side skirt, and like it was super low budget, do what you can with your skill set sort of thing, and what materials you have. And so a lot of it had been done was kind of already where it was. It was limited to 285 tires, and which is
It went
for
fast for what it was, though.
for an unlimited car, like that's not a lot of tire. But
No,
yeah, we ended up knocking over, if I recall, it ended up being like 8 or 9 seconds off their lap time at VIR with
Yeah.
basically same base engine. I went with custom cams on it. Got them onto a GTX 3582 with a front mounted turbo. Designed the intake manifold and exhaust manifold for it. Yeah, like it wasn't obscenely crazy in terms of like changes. Base line lock was the same crank, same rods, same pistons, same heads, same all that. But yeah, so kind of did the custom bits where you can, and moved weight to the rear, and that was it. We did the entire update in like a week. I went out to Tim Wiesenhon's house and literally lived there for a week, sleeping in the basement and just grinding on the car by day. But yeah, it was fun stint. Got to know the Turn-In Concept guys really well, who I still know quite well.
Yep.
And Tim, what I'm saying, Tony Wiesenhahn, ended up his ST2 car that he was running. Actually, I was going to comment on this. Makes you sound like the guy's running GLTC, because he was running ST2, and I told him the same thing. I was like, just put a 2.5, we're gonna put 10-to-1 compression ratio pistons in it, and run a small turbo, and I think it was like a 3071. It might have even been smaller than that. It wasn't on a VF because you obviously get more power in ST2 than you do in GLTC. But yeah, it was gobs torque. It was like 500 pound-feet of torque at like 3,200 RPM or something. And
What?
yeah, so like, and so the guy's just like coming off Apex, just monstering everybody in class, just because he had that big torque lump down low, and you just basically run it into flat horsepower and just run it, and that was it. So you have all the area under the curve as far as power is concerned, and you also then don't have to shift. You can kind of leave a gear out of it as opposed to having narrow power band. But yeah, which actually goes back kind of to the destroker initial design concept wasn't to be some crazy massive air mover, and which it can be for making power, but it was also so that you had an over rev, so you could stretch your gear going into a corner, not have to do an extra shift shift downshift as you go into a corner. So just kind of stretch the thing. It'll run. Your power's tapering off. You're past the peak, but you're going to be faster than if you have to shift.
That was always a big thing. Being able, when I did all the math, and one of the reasons I originally went with an EJ20 and then to the D-stroker later on was I needed a 9,000 RPM redline for Gingerman specifically, and even if I were to drop that to 8,500, that 8,500 limit on Gingerman Raceway added like 4 shifts. it was like a huge amount, and when we went to the D-stroker and we felt really good about taking it to 92, 9,300 RPM and not worrying about it whatsoever, it knocked out more. I'm really excited about the sequential going in, but like that was from a time standpoint, what that actually netted was insane.
I was gonna say,
yeah, it was huge.
Bottom ends, I don't know all the details of what's in your one, but yeah, I've had old customers who would run them to 10,000 plus.
Sure.
And they just go, and in reality, as we found in one of the situations, thankfully before it became expensive, is that the valve springs had relaxed. So at that rate, they're getting hot enough that the steel's, kind of not meant to live forever. Very similar to the issues we have in NASCAR, where it's still valve springs, and we're at the time running push rods 10,000 RPM for 600 miles, so basically wide open throttle. Like you put the amount of time in it, the valve springs become a consumable. Either that, or you have to start cooling the valve springs like we do in NASCAR. But yeah, so certain things that are out there. Other things from the past is when we went to the GT350 that became the GT4 car. The GT350 GT4 program actually went back to a cross plane crank, not a flat plane crank, because it's endurance racing as opposed to running in GS class with IMSA. Went back to a cross plane crank, and they get a sequential because they're GT4. We ended up having some valve train issues there where the shifts and the abruptness and the shock load made the valve train not so happy. So I'll say I think I actually mentioned that to you and Grant already in the chat. One thing to watch when you start doing the sequential shifting on them, particularly elevated RPMs.
And it's something we've actually started looking into, and that's one of the reasons we race here and just racing in general. We try to put stuff through its paces by me beating the ever living shit out of it. So then I break it so you don't have to, is the whole concept. So
yeah, I mean, if you guys, I know you have an Imtron down there because last time I saw JJ, he was actually down here buying one from Triad when they closed. We went and got some barbecue and talk shop. But yeah, so if I recall, that's actually up and running. So that'd actually be a perfect candidate. You put that thing on and just put it on the limiter and run it.
Yep. Just beat the
snot out. And then when things start lifting the way, stop running the way you want to, and go, we're getting some valve float, something's letting up, and cool. We found the limit before we blow something up.
I mean, that's one of the nice things about our Spintron too, is we can play with stuff like that where you just rev the balls off of it and see what happens.
And it's the nice thing about instrumentation is you can catch something before it fails, so you can actually take it apart and learn from it before everything became 1,000 pieces. Yeah,
that's one of the downsides to when if you just go till something explodes. You might not learn a ton from it. Thankfully, we managed to learn a decent amount every time I've popped one of these things, but we've actually only lost one so far that was like bad. That was the one that we're doing. That one was ugly.
I got a bit further into things I think people should instrument and follow for like track use guys on the podcast I did with Professional Awesome. I think it was the first one with them. But things to watch, things to monitor, and things that let you know, like there's science before something's going to go and be really expensive.
That's actually like if anybody wants another really good podcast to watch for listening to this, go check out Professional Awesome's podcast. Micah was on there, I don't know, 2 or 3 episodes ago. I would listen to that. It's really good. If you guys want to add something else to your your circle of podcasts. I honestly, I think we need to make like a podcast network. All of us need to band together and make a podcast network. But
I was gonna say
it's an absolutely fantastic podcast, and it goes across all brands. Just expect to get flamed for Subarus.
I will say to clarify. Oh yes, they do. They do have
Just hate.
their hate of Subarus. But it's funny is I've got Devin talking about wanting to get a BRZ now, but that's a separate thing.
Yep.
I was gonna say I've actually been on there twice, just to clarify. They weren't too far apart. So before you spend like an hour listening to the one that isn't looking for the info, it's the first one. So
listen to both of them. They're both good.
Yeah, there you go.
Either way, you have I want to talk about your particular product, and then we have to do the Nasiak thing. So,
okay.
You got a cute little thing that actually works with our air oil separator. Do you want to explain it real quick?
Sure. It's essentially an AOS drain hose, is what I call it. It's a silicone hose with a Flora silicone liner, so it's oil compatible. But what it does is it takes the drain hose in pretty much every Subaru aftermarket AOS system, as the oil draining back into the top of what is the factory air oil separator. So where air is trying to come out and the oil mist is coming from, it drains back into that. And the problem you have with a lot of the installs is the hose doesn't have a whole lot of, I'll say, vertical aspect to it. So it doesn't drain super fast. What this hose does is it actually replaces the turbo drain hose and has the AOS drop down and return to it. So you get about 4 inches of drop, and from where the AOS is located, you go from essentially a horizontal hose or near horizontal hose, I'd say roughly 45-degree angle. Flows out, flows quick, and this is particular for like your track guys and guys at corner, and you're getting a lot of cylinder head slosh and oil pushing into the AOS. It helps the oil get out of it sooner, so the AOS can keep doing its job. Well, and it's pretty cheap little guy.
Price too. How much you selling those things for?
I think MSRP 65.
Yeah, I mean it ain't much. So if something track car and you're trying to evacuate the AOS a little harder, even your basic street car, it's a solid product for sure.
For a lot of the guys, I tell them, it's something like, even if you get it, because you're going to replace your turbo at some point, it's kind of an add-on. It's something that's nice, but I don't want to have to, pull my turbo and do all this stuff, blah, 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 just to put it on. Well, if you're planning a thing, or you're going to be in there at some point where you're swapping your exhaust manifold, like, that's the time to do it. Have it
it's a really good while you're in there part.
Yeah.
Yep. So
I still need to get my adapter kit for the new your version 4 with the SE push locks. So I still got to do adapters for those. That's been on my to-do list, and I just need to get it done.
Yeah, we'll get you figured out.
Yep.
So we got to do the thing. This is for all the OGs that come on here. We have what we call the Nasiak member numbers showdown. Come on with it. Okay, so we're gonna do the Nasiak member numbers showdown, where we compare member numbers and we see who's lower, because I've been around a damn long time, but it's awesome to hear from some of these people who have actually been around longer than I have, because I fart dust. So we will just go right now. I'm interested to see where you land, because I think we're going to start a leaderboard here against the Cobb guys. Okay, we had Marshall, Billy, and Lance on, and it was so there's some serious OGs. Okay, and I'm interested to see where you land on this. Now, again, my member number, I was more of an iClub guy until iClub like really dried up. Okay, I ended up on iClub first after I bought my WRX, so I came in with the Bug Eye crowd. So I think you predate the Bug Eye crowd, so I'm the majority of the Bug Eye crowd. So I'm super interested to see where you land. So my member number is 37078.
Okay.
All right.
My member number is 33782.
Oh, you got me. Oh,
barely. I was a long time lurker. I didn't actually join in high school because like internet was new and parents were all afraid of stalkers and crazy stuff. Like remember back in the days when internet was new, right? And on top of that, we were like 56K, so you try to load pictures and you just get threads with 56K warning. Yeah, that was my life. So, yeah, I actually didn't join until I was in college. So
yeah, okay. Well, there you go. When you had access to decent internet, which is, I couldn't have got on iClub or RS25 or anything like that any sooner anyway, because I had crazy, awful dial-up at that point anyway, too. So I think the leader still is Marshall from Cobb. Marshall's got us all beat at a 21-205. And I feel like I don't remember who annihilated us, but we have somebody else that was on that had us all beat by a decent amount too. We got to get we're going to get a board up, a leaderboard somewhere, because I'm really trying to get as many of the OGs on as I can.
I'm thinking Tom from Cart Boy, Matt Monson, those guys would be like stupid low, like sub 1,000.
Cart Boy, yeah, I'm trying to get him on as soon as possible. It's something we've been talking about, trying to find time frames. He's got a lot going on right now, so we're working on it, but he is definitely on the list. So yeah, it's gonna be some good stuff. I have a really good time with that. I really, this community is changing a lot, but what I'm starting to see is a lot of the OGs are either A, still messing with their cars, or B, starting to get cars again and start messing with them again. Because like I said, once this is a part of your life, it's always a part of your life. You're coming back, bud. I'll see you soon.
Yeah, my wife has said no more than 4 cars, so if one comes, I got to get rid of one. But yeah.
So
she's like,
this
that's
is
enough.
Again, going back to this, your story's incredible. I think you're like of the US Subaru community, you're like one of these wild success stories that a lot of us like to brag about. Okay,
it's a very nice way of saying I'm a nerd. Thank you.
Ain't nothing wrong with that. Honestly, all of us original guys in the community, most of us were nerds. You know, we're some variation of some sort of geek or nerd. We just were. When we first started driving Subarus, it wasn't cool. You did not do it because it was cool. Okay, like there was something that in your brain.
Exactly, IT guy.
Yes. Yep. It was all IT guys. So
lots of IT guys, lots of engineers.
Yep. And it was funny because then when like the Eagle community was drastically different. It was all old DSMers. This is where the flat bill stuff, you know, those were the, you know, most of those guys smoked.
And somehow we turned into the vape group, right? Yeah.
Yeah, and then it was like Ken Block happened, and now we turned into flat bills and vapes. So it was a different time, dude. I'd love to have you on again. I've got some terrible roundtable ideas that I'd like to have you be a part of, and you know, if you ever come on and have anything else, you know, you have any ideas, we'd love to hear them. But
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, I can't thank you enough, man. I mean, we took up damn near 2 hours of your time, and we appreciate the hell out of it. I don't know if anybody in the chat's got any other questions, but I think that's gonna be about it. Oh, I see Mary typing something.
Oh boy.
I have lots. Well, Mary, you get one. We'll hang around, let you ask one.
You get Mary on the podcast.
Yeah,
we had Mary on the podcast.
Oh,
yeah. I'll say she was on 3 months ago.
Yeah,
2 months ago.
Long ago.
Not that long ago.
Think you were
I've
there.
Been busy. I'm sorry. Yeah. Very sorry.
Mary actually was on the podcast. No, I'll call him later. Oh, okay.
She's gonna call me now. Okay.
Yep. Now you're getting phone calls. So yeah, last October, Mary was on the podcast, and she's
already that long ago. Gosh, okay.
Yeah. Dude, time is flying.
I know. I've got an 18-month-old I got to go put down. Like she's ready for bed. So, Mary, you'll have to hold off on your call.
Yeah. All right, guys. It's been real. It's been fun. It's been real fun. Micah, thanks again for coming on. And like I said, I got some roundtable stuff that I'd like to chat about. I don't know. I've got all sorts of bad ideas. So let's let's have you back on again. Thanks, man.
Sounds good. Thanks you guys.
See you guys.